And now, WBW Theater. Welcome to WBW Theater. Listen to a series of radio dramas, comedies, mysteries, thrillers, westerns, all dedicated to preserving the golden age of radio. Those thrilling days of yesteryear, way back when families gathered together around the living room radio to join the theater of the mind. Listen now as we take you way back when imagination ruled and creativity had no limits. Listen now to WBW Theater.
Stephen Stewart, 48, suave in a slimy way, lies in his bed. He wears white-on-white silk pajamas. There is a bullet hole in his head, a green silk scarf around his neck, a stab wound on his chest. There is a glass with a clear liquid on the bedstand. The room is done in Victorian style. Sun is coming in from the window. The setting is in the sitting room of the Stewart estate. The location is Dorchester County, New England. The time is the present in the early morning after breakfast. A murder has just occurred in the upstairs master bedroom, where Stephen Stewart lies in his white-on-white silk pajamas, a bullet hole in his forehead, a green silk scarf knotted tightly around his throat, a stab wound in his chest, the odor of bitter almonds about his lips, and in a glass beside the bed, enough strychnine to fell an elephant. Downstairs in the sitting room, there sit 6 people, all of them possible suspects in the case. Alan P. Smith, 42, dressed in high-end power clothes. Stephanie Stewart, the widow of the late Mr. Stewart. She's an attractive blonde in her early 30s, with blue-green eyes and a regal air. The third suspect is an out-of-work Broadway actor who is seated next to Stephanie. His name is Richard Harrison. Sydney Evans, an astonishingly constructed girl with hair the color of silver dollars. Standing to the side is Hawkins, 60. Red eyes betray his real condition, though he stands steadily. Max Peterson, 39, mousy right down to his glasses. With them sits Robert Anderson, 50, duly elected and regularly re-elected, distinguished-looking, modest county coroner. Robert accepts with quivering hands the glass offered him by Stephanie. Robert raises his eyes upward, shudders, closes his eyes, and drains the glass at a gulp. Then he gives a quick shiver and sits up straight. He returns his glass to Stephanie.
Thank you. I feel much better now. It gave me quite a turn seeing Mr. Stewart in such an exceptionally dead condition.
I should think you'd be used to that sort of thing.
Oh, dear, no. Ordinarily, I let Dr. West handle the that is to say, the technical details. And if we say somebody's dead, I usually agree with him, or else the sheriff takes over. But the sheriff's off at a convention, and West was busy at the hospital, and meanwhile, there's this fool of a law that says the coroner must personally certify, etc. I wish Cousin James had mentioned that when he gave me this job years ago.
Would that be James Anderson, the state party chairman?
I called him as soon as I got the news, and he said in view of Mr. Stewart's prominence, I'd better haul my come at once.
You needn't have rushed. We barely had time to finish breakfast as it was. But as long as you're here, what's next?
Well, Mr. Anderson?
A shocking thing. You may rest assured we'll leave no stone unturned to apprehend the perpetrator of this outrage.
Why?
What do you mean, why?
I think what Miss Evan means is that the only reason we can think of for finding the murderer is to give him some kind of commendation. Possibly a certificate from the Board of Sanitation. You couldn't spit into a crowd of any size without hitting someone who'd like to see Stephen dead. In fact, just before you arrived, we were wondering among ourselves which of us didn't hate him enough to kill him.
I don't understand you.
Well, there were 5 methods used, but there are 6 of us.
6? Are you including Mr. Stewart's butler as a suspect?
I insist! I've got my rights!
After all, he found the body and was the last person to see Stefan alive last night.
I could have been snoggered. I'm just as well as anybody. Maybe even better.
Did you?
No.
We won't know what really killed Mr. Stewart until Dr. West finishes his autopsy anyway, so we may as well try to establish the sequence of events. Now, what happened after Hawkins found the body?
He told me and I told the others. Then we all trooped upstairs to check and figure out what to do. I remarked that Stefan was looking poorly, not himself at all, and Alan said it was understandable since he'd evidently had a fairly wild night, and besides, death changes a person's appearance. Then Hawkins suggested you ought to be called, and Richard asked if there were any relatives to be notified.
Are there?
Stefan once mentioned a brother, but he reportedly vanished in Tibet years and years ago. I said I didn't know how to send a message to Tibet, and Richard said you started with a responsible yak.
Please, get on.
And that was it. Max said something about the newspapers getting hold of this, and Cindy got all excited and said she wanted to change into something more suitable.
And then we all went back to breakfast.
Back to breakfast? After learning that your host had been murdered?
No need to let it spoil the whole weekend, old man.
Well, of course not.
Another drink, Mr. Anderson?
Just a small... No, perhaps I'd better not. Now then, you claim your late husband had enemies?
He collected them the way some people collect matchbook covers. A new group with every issue of his magazine. But if you ask me, Mr. Anderson, you're on the wrong track entirely. I am certain my husband committed suicide. Surely you've heard of all those libel suits against Expose. Over $7 million worth up to the last Thursday. Obviously, Stefan couldn't face them, so he killed himself.
5 different ways?
He was always very thorough.
It won't do, Mrs. Stewart, and I find it hard to accept the theory of enemies, since he was killed in his own home among his friends.
Mr. Anderson, there are a couple things you should know. First, Stefan Stewart had no friends. I knew him in college, and where he was an odious little sneak with a theory that into each life some dirt must fall, and that he ought to know what it was in order to make something out of it. Nobody paid any attention to him until he inherited enough money to begin printing his slimy scandals. But now you find half the population waiting avidly for its monthly lesson and license. The other half are the people Stefan had the goods on, ourselves included, all of whom would have bought tickets to see him drawn and quartered. The second thing is, with one exception, none of us have ever met until this weekend. We've been wondering, rather, why he chose to bring us together.
That's true. We're the exception Alan refers to. We've loved each other for years, but Stefan would never agree to a divorce. Probably because it might have made Stephanie happy. And she couldn't file because he had a story about me and threatened to print it if she did. If you're looking for motives, Mr. Anderson, there are a couple of good ones. I only responded to his invitation because I wanted to see Stephanie once more before I left. I'm taking a couple of months' vacation at a place I own in South America. As for the rest of this party, I know little more about them than you do.
You know our names. I'm the executive vice president of the Carib Cruise and Export Lines of New York.
I work for the State Department in Washington. Passports.
I'm a model.
And the late Mr. Stewart held some embarrassing secrets about each of you.
I hope you don't mind if we don't choose to unburden ourselves further at the moment.
These turned up in the search, sir. No fingerprints on any of them. This is the target pistol from the shooting range in the rec room downstairs, fired recently. It was in Mrs. Stewart's dressing table. The scarf around the deceased's neck is monogrammed with Miss Evans's initials. His bottle of cyanide was in Mr. Smith's suitcase.
Here now, I emptied that case completely when I unpacked.
The bottle of strychnine was in Mr. Peterson's shaving kit. And this ice pick, which appears to have traces of blood on it, was found in the butler's pantry.
Ooh, nothing in my room. Write that down, Mr. Anderson. It looks very suspicious to me.
Dr. West.
Greetings, Robert. Thought you'd like to hear the autopsy results. Very curious situation. Of course, the lack of cyanosis indicated at once that the scarf could be eliminated as a cause of death. It was tied around Stewart's neck afterwards. Similarly, there was no sign of hemorrhage at either the stab or bullet wound. They, too, were made after death.
So, it was the poison? I suspected it all along.
So it would seem. However, analysis of the stomach contents showed no trace of cyanide or strychnine or anything, indeed, more lethal than a light supper.
Then what?
Well, brace yourself, Robert. Stephen Stewart died of a heart attack.
Heart attack?
Hate to break up a jolly little murder case, but there it is, with no doubt whatever. Stewart's pump blew a gasket.
But the bullet and the ice pick and
now you wander into the realm of the psychotic. Judging from the fill-in your man gave me, any or all of these folks might have done that, though I would guess the deeds were done by one individual of a vindictive turn of mind. But there you are, Robert. If you care to pursue this murky matter further, you may nail someone on a charge of corpse mutilation, but not on a murder charge, or my name ain't young Dr. Kildare. I bid you good day.
Good heavens! What will Cousin James say?
I fail to see your problem, Mr. Anderson. Things could hardly have worked out better for you.
Better? I can't make heads or tails out of any of this. And you say things couldn't be better?
Certainly. Look at the facts. Here you are, a modest county coroner faced with a baffling death of a prominent publisher. But, unimpressed by a mass of confusing and contradictory clues, you pierce directly to the heart of the matter and prove he died of a natural death. Dr. West has sworn to it. What need is there to stir up the newspapers, or Cousin James, with trivial details?
Bless my soul. You're absolutely right. The case is closed, isn't it?
You mean there won't be any photographers?
There, my dear. You'll have other opportunities to display your talents, I'm sure. What fools we've been! Don't you see? The moment West mentions Stefan's light dinner...
My God, you're right. Stefan ate a particularly heavy dinner last night. Someone even made a comment about where he was stowing it all.
I still don't understand.
You really spotted it before any of us when you said Stefan looked different somehow, and we all dismissed it. He looked different, my darling, because that wasn't Stefan.
Congratulations.
Stefan!
How pleasant it is to see once more the friends I'd left behind. I understand you met my poor brother Stanley this morning.
Is he the one who vanished in Tibet?
The same. Like you, I was astonished at his resemblance to me when he suddenly turned up last night after all you'd retired. After years of climbing mountains and eating yak butter, he looked no healthier than I do after years among the flesh pots. So much for clean living. I assume your modest intelligences have begun to fathom my little plan. The oddly assorted talents here should have tipped you off. An official in a steamline who once smuggled far more dangerous cargo than a simple publisher. A ham with his own private smokehouse in Brazil. A man whose vocation is passports, and whose avocation was once the forging thereof. And a plaything to while away a lonely exile. Though I admit I was having some second thoughts about that extremely low-pressure intellect of yours, my love.
If you were going to skip the country, why didn't you just go, without all this nonsense about a faked murder?
Because, my barn theatre Romeo, Stanley's arrival dropped a better plan into my lap. He wanted me to finance his retirement to a nursing home. Knew about his heart, you see. Unhappily, it failed to survive the joy of our reunion. But he left a perfectly good passport I could use to better advantage than a forged one, while I have amassed enough cash here and in Brazilian banks to keep me for many years. It's a pity my plaintiffs, or you, my dear Stephanie, will find so few assets left to divide. So, now, I don't need any of you. With the cloud of suspicion surrounding Stanley's death, thanks to me, none of you will ever convince the authorities that Stephen Stewart is living at ease in South America. A few moments to remove some traveling accessories. I couldn't very well take it last night, and I shall be gone. And with me, documentary evidence of your assorted peccadillos, in case I ever run short of funds. Well, goodbye, and be damned to all of you.
The scene is now in the same room a little later. Mr. Anderson sits on the edge of a chair, hands clasped between his knees, eyes staring fixedly out at the garden, now awash with the orange hues of sunset. Every so often he rocks a little. Alan Smith leans over and taps his knee as Stephanie, Cindy, Richard, Max, and Hawkins watch anxiously.
You understand our position, Mr. Anderson?
Oh, yes, certainly.
We knew the authorities had to be told.
Of course. We have to tell the authorities every blasted thing, don't you?
So when we recalled the capable way you conducted today's investigation, we naturally turned to you again.
Besides, we wouldn't want you getting in trouble with Cousin James, having to rake up that other matter.
Then you think our idea is sound?
Yeah, I guess so.
We thought we might put him in the copse behind the rock garden. Hawkins says it's very secluded, owing to the steady encroachment of poison ivy.
Rather fitting, don't you think?
Fine.
I'll get the shovels, sir.
Left alone, Mr. Anderson raises his eyes to the ceiling, up toward the master bedroom where, impossibly, a second Stephen Stewart lay in his white-on-white pajamas, a bullet hole in his forehead, a stab wound in his chest, a green silk scarf knotted around his throat, the odor of bitter almonds about his lips, and in a glass beside the bed, enough strychnine to fell an elephant.
Join us again as we bring you exciting thrills and adventure, rip-roaring comedy, and shoot-'em-up westerns and gangbusters. Next time, when your imaginations will be invited into the theater of the mind that is WBW Theater.